This is another grammar video explaining the 4 different uses of the Japanese auxiliary verb reru, rareru. This video supplements my previous video about the Japanese indirect passive. I am also going to make a separate follow-up video to the indirect passive video soon, so stay tuned. This video is divided into 5 parts. In part 1, I will explain when to use reru and when to use rareru. From part 2 to part 5, I will explain each of the 4 uses of reru and rareru. Let's begin. Part 1. First of all, reru and rareru are used with verbs of different conjugation patterns. Conjugation refers to how verbs change forms. Reru is an auxiliary verb that follows verbs of 2 specific conjugation patterns, namely 語段活用 and 作業変革活用 to use the technical terms. To explain these terms simply, 語段活用動詞 are regular verbs that end in the "a" sound when followed by the negative ない. For example, 書く is a 語段活用 verb because the negative form of 書く is 書かない and the verb ends in the "a" sound before ない. The verb stems of 語段活用 verbs also end in consonants. Let's look at another example. 行く. The verb stem of 行く is ik and the verb conjugates in the following manner. 行か、行き、行く、行け and 行こ. The second conjugation type, 作業変革活用, basically refers to the conjugation pattern of verbs that include an irregular verb, する. する is one of the few irregular verbs in Japanese that means to do, and する also combines with a lot of nouns to turn them into verb phrases. For example, the combination of the noun 勉強 and the verb する is 勉強する, and this phrase is the verb phrase to study. These 2 conjugation types are the only verb groups that use reru, and all the other verbs in Japanese are followed by rareru. It is, however, quite common for native Japanese speakers to confuse these 2 auxiliary verbs. ら抜き言葉 refers to verbs that should take rareru, but speakers often use reru instead for these verbs. Famous examples include 食べれる and 見れる, which should be 食べられる and 見られる according to the textbook grammar. These are considered incorrect and are not used in formal writing, but you are very likely to encounter these supposedly incorrect verb conjugations in Japan. So don't worry too much about which auxiliary verb to use, because even the Japanese don't get it right. Part 2. The first use of reru and rareru is 受け身 or 受動体 or the passive voice in English. You are likely to know this use already, so I am going to be brief. In the passive voice, the subject is usually affected by an action or event described in the sentence in question, as opposed to the subject doing or causing the action or event, respectively. Let's look at one example. 亮に足を蹴られた. I got kicked in the leg by Ryo. The active counterpart of this sentence would be 亮が足を蹴った. Ryo kicked my leg. Notice that in the passive version, the doer of the kicking action is marked by the particle に, whereas in the active version, the doer is indicated by が. As mentioned in my indirect passive video, Japanese also has a special type of passive called indirect or adversative passive. You can watch my video to find out more. Japanese also has another type of passive that does not use reru or rareru, and I'll make a video about it soon. Part 3. The second use of reru and rareru is 可能, which can be translated as ability, possibility, or potential in English. This is another use that most people know about. This use roughly corresponds to the English auxiliary verb can or the verb phrase to be able to. The meaning of this use is self-evident, so let's look at a few examples. このご飯まだ食べられるかな? Do you think you can still eat this rice? 僕100メートル10秒で走れるようになったよ. I can now run 100 meters in 10 seconds. One thing to note here is that Japanese has a special type of verbs called 可能動詞, which already include the meaning of ability or possibility without the use of reru or rareru. 可能 means possible and 動詞 means verb. Examples of 可能動詞 include 見える to be able to see, which derives from 見る to see, and 死ねる to be able to die, which derives from 死ぬ to die. 可能動詞 cannot be followed by reru or rareru, so we do not say 見えれる or 見えられる, and instead we add reru or rareru to the normal verb 見る to see. Part 4. The third use of reru and rareru is 尊敬 or subject honorific. This is the easiest type of 尊敬語 or respectful language and can be used with almost any verb. As the English name suggests, the respect is usually directed at the person in the subject position of the sentence, in which reru or rareru is used. However, as we will see shortly, it is more accurate to say that the respect goes towards the doer of the verb that is combined with reru or rareru. Let's look at a few examples. 先生はもう来られましたか? has the teacher arrived yet? In this sentence, the doer of the action to come or to arrive is sensei, so the respect implied by 来られる is directed at sensei. Another example. お客様が購入された商品に欠陥が見つかりました。The product you purchased has been found defective. In this example, the subject of the sentence as a whole is 商品 or the product, but the respectful verb phrase 購入された or purchased refers to the action of the customer, so the respect is shown towards the customer rather than the product. Be careful not to confuse this with the passive 出る or られる. In the first example, 来られました cannot be interpreted in the passive sense because this action is performed by sensei, and if this were passive, sensei would be affected by this action rather than doing the action. Similarly, in the second example, 購入された cannot be interpreted passively. If you want to turn this into a passive phrase, you need to say お客様に購入された商品 or the product which was purchased by the customer. Using the particle に as stated above, this particle usually indicates the doer of the action in a passive sentence. Some verbs do not go well with the polite version of 出る and られる. Using our favorite example, 死ぬ or to die, you don't say 先生が死なれた, the teacher passed away. It is more common to say 先生が亡くなった or even 先生がお亡くなりになった to be more polite. 亡くなる is another verb that means to die, and this is more polite than 死ぬ. I was originally going to talk more about 敬語 or polite language in Japanese, but 敬語 is a highly complicated topic that deserves its own video. Part 5. The final use of 出る and られる is 自発 or spontaneity in English. This is the least frequent use, and therefore it is likely that you haven't noticed this use before. 自発 literally means self-happen. Let's look at a few examples. 故郷の父のことが忍ばれる. I found myself missing my father back in my hometown. 忍ぶ is a verb that means to miss or to feel nostalgic about or to feel attracted to in a non-romantic and more aesthetic and moral way. In this sentence, 忍ぶ is followed by 出る, and this shows that the feeling of missing your father just spontaneously appeared. So it is common to translate this type of phrase using I found myself thinking or feeling in a certain way. Another example, アルバムを手に取るたびに子供時代の出来事が思い出される. Every time I hold the album in my hands, I find myself reminiscing about the events from my childhood. As you may have noticed, 自発 is usually used with psychological verbs that express thoughts and feelings, such as 思う to think and 思い出す to remember. So you don't use 自発 for actions and events that do not take place in the human mind. For instance, you don't say 地震が静まられる to mean the earthquake ceased spontaneously, or 猫が寝られる to mean the cat fell asleep spontaneously. This is the end of the video. Let me know if you have any questions or requests, and check out my other videos. I will be making another video about the indirect passive soon, and a separate video to explain keigo or polite language. See you soon.